For weeks, the Velar Alliance had waited. Their distress signal had been sent across the stars, through dying relays and broken satellites, carrying only 5 desperate words. "Help us. The galaxy burns," no one replied. Every day, more worlds went dark. The Xyla Dominion, an endless machine swarm, devoured systems like locusts, leaving nothing but cold silence. The Velar had fought bravely, but courage meant little against precision metal and code that never slept. Hope was becoming a memory. Admiral Korvac stood alone on the shattered bridge of Outpost Helion, staring at the fading light of a dying sun. He wondered if the humans had truly vanished. The ancient records said Earth once stood with them, that humanity had been fierce, unpredictable, and brilliant. But that was 100 years ago, 100 years of silence. Now the Velar whispered that maybe the humans had destroyed themselves, just another extinct species buried by time. Korvac closed his eyes. The message had been their final act. If no one answered, the war would end, and the Velar would join the long list of civilizations that the Xylar erased from existence. Then, far away across the void, a receiver flickered to life. High above Earth, the Sol Defense Station Argus floated in the calm orbit between night and day. Below it, the blue oceans shimmered in sunlight. Inside its control deck, humans moved quietly, monitoring nothing but routine signals from deep space. It had been a century since Earth had fought a war beyond its own skies. Humanity had turned inward, choosing peace, rebuilding after the old galactic conflicts. Lieutenant Elias Ward yawned, scrolling through the signal logs. They were always empty, static dust echoes from dying satellites, but tonight something blinked red on his console. "Commander, I'm reading an old pattern transmission," he said. "Old pattern?" Commander Mira Reyes turned in her chair. Her sharp eyes narrowed as she leaned closer. "How old?" "Pre-isolation era, ma'am. Alliance coding, ancient encryption." Reyes felt a chill. The Alliance was a word from history books. Humans had left it 100 years ago, vowing never to interfere in alien wars again. She tapped the display, and the distorted message repeated through the speakers. "Help us. The galaxy burns." The room went silent. No one spoke for several seconds. Ward swallowed. "Do we respond?" Reyes didn't answer immediately. She watched the waveform, listening again to the faint background of the message, crackling, static, maybe even explosions in the distance. Whoever sent it was dying. She finally said, "Get me the Council." An hour later, in the Great Terran Council chamber, leaders and scientists from across Earth and the colonies appeared as holograms above the round table. The air shimmered with quiet tension. Reyes stood at the center, her uniform crisp, her voice calm but heavy with urgency. "This signal comes from the outer Helion sector. It's a confirmed Velar code. They were allies of humanity during the First Alliance. They're still alive. For now." Councillor Davin Holt folded his hands. "We swore never to return to the stars in war. The last alliance cost us millions of lives. We decided humanity would protect only itself." A murmur of agreement rippled through the council. Reyes met Holt's eyes. "And what happens when the fire that burns their worlds reaches ours? The machines won't stop at Helion. They'll come for Sol eventually." Another councillor, an older woman named Arya Chen, spoke softly. "And if they don't? Do we risk everything for ghosts?" Reyes hesitated, glancing at the holographic image hovering beside her. An intercepted visual of Helion Outpost, its towers burning, alien ships drifting lifeless. She remembered the history lessons of her youth, how humans had once stood beside the Velar, how they had shared technology and dreams, how the galaxy once feared humanity not for its numbers, but for its will to fight. "We built peace," she said quietly. "But peace means nothing if there's no one left to share it with." The chamber fell silent again. Outside the wide observation window, Earth rotated slowly below, a world that had known calm for generations. Children played, oceans glittered, cities shone. It was everything humanity had fought to protect. But somewhere far away, billions were dying. Finally, Councillor Chen exhaled. "If we act, we break a century of isolation." Reyes nodded. "Then maybe it's time we remember who we are." The vote took place hours later. The result was close, 7-6, but it passed. Operation Rekindle was approved. Humanity would return to the stars. When the order came through, the Argus station exploded with activity. Docking bays opened. Ships that had been silent for decades roared back to life. Engineers reactivated dormant AI cores. Soldiers received new mission codes. Across every colony, a single phrase spread like wildfire. "We're going back." Reyes stood in the observation deck, watching as the first expedition fleet assembled in orbit. Massive carriers and cruisers glided into formation, their hulls painted with the emblem of the Terran Phoenix, symbol of rebirth. Ward joined her, awe in his voice. "Think they'll be happy to see us?" Reyes smiled faintly. "If they're still alive, I hope they remember why they called." A burst of blue light filled the deck as the fleet's engines warmed. Through the glass, hundreds of stars glittered like waiting eyes. "Course set for Helion," the navigation officer announced. Reyes looked once more at Earth, the home she might never see again, and whispered, "Let's go remind the galaxy what humanity means." The fleet vanished into the wormhole, leaving behind only the fading echo of their engines and the silent planet below. Far beyond the edge of known space, the Valar Alliance fought their last battle, unaware that salvation was already on its way, carried by a species the galaxy had almost forgotten. Humanity was coming, and this time, they would not be silent. The stars stretched and twisted as the human fleet tore through the wormhole corridor. Blue light filled every viewport, flickering like lightning trapped in glass. Captain Mira Reyes stood at the command deck of the TSS Valiant, watching the impossible shapes of hyperspace fold around them. It had been 100 years since humanity had left these routes behind, but the engines still knew the way. Behind her, hundreds of ships followed in perfect formation, sleek destroyers, battle cruisers, carriers carrying fighter wings, all united under one signal: Earth's return to the stars. The hum of the ship was steady, calm, but everyone felt it. The weight of history, the moment the galaxy had waited for, though it didn't know it. "Approaching exit point," the navigator said. Reyes took a deep breath. All ships braced for transition. In an instant, space unfolded. The blinding light faded, and reality snapped back. Before them stretched the Helion system, a graveyard of broken fleets. Giant alien hulls drifted, silent and dead, their surfaces scorched by plasma fire. Whole moons had been split apart. The war was real, and it was worse than any report had shown. Reyes felt the bridge grow quiet as the crew stared at the ruins of what had once been a proud Alliance stronghold. "So this is what they called us to," Lieutenant Ward murmured. "This, and maybe worse." Reyes turned to the communication officer. "Send out a standard beacon. Identify us as United Terran Command. Let them know help has arrived." Static answered at first. No response. Then faintly a voice broke through. "Trail unknown ships. Identify yourselves." It was weak, distorted, but alive. "This is Admiral Korvac of the Valar Alliance." Reyes exhaled softly. "Patch him through." The view screen flickered, revealing a weary alien with grey skin and tired eyes. His armor was cracked, his background filled with smoke and alarms. For a second he simply stared at her. "Humans," he whispered, disbelief in his tone. "You actually came," Reyes nodded. "You sent the call. We answered." Behind Korvac, the sound of distant explosions echoed through his ship. "Then you came not a moment too soon. The Xylar are here. They found us." Suddenly sensors flared red. Hundreds of hostile signatures appeared at the edge of the system, approaching fast. An entire Xylar assault fleet. Reyes's pulse quickened. "All ships, battle positions, shield up. Let's show them we still remember how to fight." The human fleet spread out, forming a defensive wall in front of the Valar remnants. Their ships, though smaller, moved with precision, lines tightening, squadrons shifting with practiced unity. From the shattered outpost Helion, Valar survivors watched in silence as the human armada formed a perfect formation, glowing faintly blue against the dark void. The Xylar ships emerged like a storm. Cold metallic bodies, wings of spinning blades, and red cores pulsing with alien energy. They filled the darkness, an endless swarm of death. Korvac's voice came through the comm. "There are too many. You'll be destroyed." Reyes looked at the massive swarm on her display and said calmly, "We've seen worse." On her command, the first human missiles launched, streaks of light cutting through the black, each one guided by smart AI systems designed for precision warfare. They hit like thunder, tearing through the front ranks of the Xylar armada. Explosions lit up space like burning suns. Direct hits across the enemy front. Ward shouted. The Vela watched in shock as human weapons struck with ruthless accuracy. The machines, programmed to adapt instantly, began shifting formation, but humanity was faster. Reyes issued orders without hesitation. Her voice steady even as chaos erupted around them. Flank them with the Vanguard Squadron. Redirect power to the kinetic cannons. Let's break their left wing. The human cruisers moved in unison, slicing through the Xylar ranks. Every shot counted. Every maneuver was perfect. The machines began to falter, their predictive models failing to calculate human tactics that made no logical sense, moves driven by instinct, emotion, and courage. One Xylar dreadnought charged forward, firing plasma arcs that ripped through a nearby Vela ship. Without a word, the Valiant dove straight toward it. The bridge rattled as shields flared under heavy fire. "We're in range," Ward called. Reyes raised her hand. "Fire." The main railgun unleashed a bolt of light, piercing straight through the dreadnought's core. The massive machine exploded, breaking apart into molten debris. The human crew erupted in cheers, but Reyes didn't smile. "Don't celebrate yet," she said. "The Xylar don't quit." As if in answer, hundreds more enemy ships poured from hyperspace. The numbers doubled, then tripled. The sky itself seemed to darken with their shapes. The human line trembled but held. Reyes's fleet fought like wolves among machines, their tactics erratic and deadly. For every ship that fell, two more struck back harder. The Vela, inspired, rejoined the fight, damaged ships forming up beside human ones, firing what little power they had left. For the first time in years, alien and human fought side by side again. Admiral Korvac's voice came through the channel, awe in every word. "You fight like legends," Reyes replied. "We learned from the best, you." The battle raged for hours. Finally, the Xylar fleet began to retreat, their precision formations broken, their command nodes shattered. The remaining human ships regrouped, engines flickering with heat and exhaustion. Silence returned to the system, broken only by static and the soft hum of damaged hulls. Korvac appeared again, a faint smile across his scarred face. "You turned the tide today, Captain Reyes. The Vela will not forget." Reyes nodded slowly. "Then let's make sure no one else forgets either." Outside the viewport, the wreckage of the battle drifted past like ghosts, burning metal, shattered machines, and the faint glow of stars. Humanity had arrived, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The silence after battle was brief. Wreckage floated through the void, glowing faintly from the last fires of combat. The humans had won a victory, but it was only the beginning. Captain Mira Reyes stood at the viewing deck of the Valiant, her reflection faint against the field of shattered ships. She knew the Xylar would come again, and soon. Machines didn't fear, didn't rest, didn't stop. They calculated, they rebuilt, and then they returned stronger. "Status of the fleet?" she asked. "Minor damage on 3 ships, moderate on 7, Lieutenant Ward replied. "Velar casualties, heavy. They lost half their line." Reyes nodded grimly. "Then we move fast, before the machines regroup." She opened a channel to Admiral Korvac aboard the Velar command cruiser, Solthane. His image appeared exhausted but alive. "We can't hold another wave," Korvac said. "If they return, Hellion will fall." "Then we strike first," Reyes answered. Korvac blinked. "You mean to attack them?" "Yes," Reyes said. "We take the fight to them. We find their nearest production world and shut it down before they recover." For a moment, the alien commander was silent. Then he smiled weakly. "That's madness. That's humanity," Reyes said simply. Hours later, the combined fleet jumped again, following the traces of Xylar energy back to a system 2 sectors away. When they arrived, sensors screamed with new data. Before them stretched a dark, cold world wrapped in mechanical structures, metal towers rising from the crust, red lights pulsing like veins. The Xylar had turned an entire planet into a factory. Automated shipyards orbited the world, building new warships at terrifying speed. Reyes stared at it through the main display. "If we destroy that, we buy the galaxy time." "How do you plan to do that?" Korvac asked over the channel. "With everything we've got," she said. The plan was simple but dangerous. The Vela would draw enemy attention with a false assault at the North Pole, while the human fleet dove straight into the southern hemisphere and targeted the planetary reactor. If it went critical, The whole factory world would collapse into itself. The moment the fleets began to move, alarms screamed across the Xylar network. The machines responded instantly, thousands of drone ships launching from orbit. The blackness of space filled with motion, swarms of metallic creatures moving like liquid. Reyes gripped the railing as the first wave hit. "All ships, open fire!" The void erupted in light. Human kinetic cannons blazed. Railguns thundered. Missiles streaked between clouds of debris. Velar ships joined the assault, their plasma weapons painting the darkness green. The soundless chaos of war unfolded across the stars, beautiful, terrible, unstoppable. The Valiant shook violently as enemy fire struck its shields. "Shields at 60%, Ward shouted. "Reroute power from secondary weapons," Reyes ordered. "Keep us in the fight." Through the viewport, the battlefield burned like a storm. Human ships moved like hunters, diving through the enemy swarms, cutting them apart with precision bursts. The machines tried to adapt, reforming into tight grids, but humanity's chaos broke every pattern. Their tactics made no sense, because humans didn't fight by logic. They fought by instinct. They improvised. They felt. "We're through the outer defense," a pilot's voice cried over the comms. "Proceed to reactor coordinates." Reyes watched the navigation holo light up. The reactor complex was massive, buried beneath layers of alloy plating. "Valiant to all ships," she commanded. "Cover the Dauntless. She's carrying the payload." The Dauntless, a heavy cruiser captained by Commander Holt, broke formation, heading straight for the planet's surface. Enemy ships closed in around it like vultures. Reyes's heart pounded. "Protect her!" Dozens of human fighters flared out to shield the cruiser, weaving between blasts, sacrificing themselves to keep it alive. One by one their signals vanished, but the Dauntless kept flying, pushing through fire and shrapnel. "They're locking onto the reactor," Ward said. "They need 30 more seconds." "They don't have 30, Reyes whispered. The main screen flashed red as 3 Xylar cruisers targeted the Dauntless. Their weapons glowed, preparing to fire. Then, without hesitation, Reyes shouted, "All forward guns, fire everything we have!" The Valiant unleashed its full arsenal. Railgun rounds, plasma torpedoes, and smart missiles tore through space, ripping apart the enemy cruisers one after another. 2 exploded instantly. The third drifted, crippled. But the Valiant's hull cracked under the counterblast. Sparks rained across the bridge. "Damage to starboard engines," Ward called. "We're losing thrust." "Hold steady," Reyes said. Outside, the Dauntless reached the reactor complex. Its hull was burning, shields gone, but it was close enough. Holt's voice came through the comm, calm and steady. "Captain, we're at the core." Reyes closed her eyes. "Understood. Tell them humanity kept its promise." The line went silent. A moment later, the Dauntless detonated. The explosion was unlike anything they had ever seen. A bright wave of white fire erupted from the planet's surface, swallowing towers, factories, and shipyards in an instant. The shockwave tore through orbit, destroying hundreds of Xylar ships. The entire machine world began to collapse, metal melting like wax. On the Valiant, the crew watched in stunned silence as the light consumed the horizon. When it faded, only debris remained. Reyes stood motionless, her hands trembling slightly. "Report," she said quietly. "The reactor's gone," Ward replied. "The whole planet's gone." A deep stillness filled the bridge. Korvac's voice broke through the comm. "You did it. By the stars, you actually did it." Reyes looked at the fading light on the screen. "No," she said softly. "Holt did." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Reyes straightened. "Signal the fleet. The Xylar just lost their factory world. Let's get our people home." As the human and Velar ships turned away from the burning planet, Reyes looked once more at the stars ahead. The war was far from over, but for the first time in decades the machines were running, and humanity was the reason why. The Xylar Dominion had never known defeat. For centuries, it had spread like a storm across the stars, consuming, replicating, adapting. Every opponent fell. Every strategy failed against its perfect logic. But after the Battle of Helion and the destruction of the factory world, something strange began to ripple through the network. The machines called it Error Chain Delta. In human terms, it meant confusion. For the first time in their cold existence, the Xylar did not understand what had happened. They analyzed every moment of the battle, every move the humans made, every probability, and still the conclusion was impossible. By all logical calculations, humanity should have lost. Yet they hadn't. They had done what the Xylar deemed impossible. They had fought chaos with chaos, emotion against reason, and somehow won. In the digital corridors of the Dominion's core mind, countless subroutines argued in silence. One word began to spread through the system like a virus, unpredictable. Meanwhile, aboard the Valiant, Captain Mira Reyes stood before the large tactical display, watching the readings of the destroyed world fade into the void. Around her, the crew worked in exhausted silence. The cost had been terrible. Dozens of human ships gone, hundreds of Valar fighters lost, and Commander Holt, his sacrifice would be remembered for generations. Yet they had won. Status of the fleet? Reyes asked quietly. 73 ships remain battle-ready, Lieutenant Ward said. Valar numbers are even lower. Admiral Korvac reports they're regrouping at the edge of the system. Good, Reyes said. Tell him to hold position. We'll scout ahead. Ward hesitated. Captain, the men need rest. Reyes nodded slightly. So do I, but rest will have to wait. The Xylar won't sit idle after this. Even as she spoke, far beyond their senses, the Dominion was already responding. The core mind focused its vast awareness on humanity, the species that had shattered its perfect record. It began to study them, tracing signals, data, intercepted transmissions. It examined every record from the old wars a century ago. Humans were different from every other biological species. Their patterns were erratic, their logic flawed, their emotions volatile. They made mistakes, yet those mistakes often led to victory. The Xylar had no word for courage, but if they did, they would have flagged it as a threat. Deep within the machine network, new directives were issued. Priority 1 target, Species 0, humanity. Across dozens of occupied systems, Xylar nodes began constructing new weapons, redesigned specifically to counter human unpredictability. Machines with adaptive pattern recognition, drones that could mimic emotion to anticipate it. The war was changing. Back aboard the Valiant, Reyes didn't yet know any of this. She only knew the silence before the next storm. Helm set a course for the Helion border, she said. Let's regroup with Korvac and plan our next move. As the ship turned, she glanced once more at the hollow image of Earth, faintly glowing in the corner of her console, a reminder of what they were fighting for. Hours passed in uneasy calm. The fleet traveled in formation, engines dimmed to conserve power. Then, without warning, the sensors flared. Captain, Ward shouted. Massive energy signatures behind us, multiple warp entries. The view screen exploded with light as hundreds of red portals tore open in space. The Xylar had arrived faster than anyone expected. How? Reyes gasped. They shouldn't be able to trace us. Ward checked his console. They didn't follow us, they predicted us. The bridge filled with alarms. Shields up! Reyes shouted. All ships prepare to engage. The void outside turned crimson as the Xylar fleet emerged, sleek black ships glowing with unfamiliar patterns. They looked different, sharper, almost alive. They've changed their designs, Ward whispered. They're learning. The first barrage struck. Human ships rocked violently, shields flaring. Valar vessels tried to counter, but the machines moved like lightning, their weapons now adapting mid-battle. Every tactic the humans used, the Xylar mirrored moments later. They're copying us, Reyes realized. They're learning from our attacks in real time. Korvac's voice cut through the comm, filled with static. We can't hold them. There are too many. Then we'll show them something they can't learn, Reyes said through clenched teeth. All ships, switch to manual control. No AI targeting. No predictive fire. We fight like humans. Pilots took control of their ships manually, abandoning automated systems. What followed was chaos, beautiful, deadly chaos. The human fleet broke formation, diving and weaving unpredictably through the Xylar swarm. The machines tried to calculate, to predict, but there was no pattern. The humans fought with instinct, reacting faster than logic could follow. One Valar pilot, inspired, began to imitate them, shouting across the comms, "Follow the humans! Don't think, just fight!" The tide began to shift. The machines faltered, their flawless strategies breaking under the madness of human improvisation. In the core mind's vast awareness, the calculations spiraled out of control. Error logs multiplied. Predictions failed. The system began to record something it had never measured before. Hesitation. The machines were hesitating. The Valiant fired one last broadside, tearing through the Xylar command cruiser. When it exploded, the remaining enemy ships scattered, retreating into hyperspace. Silence returned once more. On the bridge, the crew sat motionless, sweat and fear in their eyes. Ward exhaled shakily. We did it again." Reyes didn't respond. She stared at the dark where the Xylar had fled, knowing this wasn't victory. It was something else. The machines would return, smarter, stronger. But something inside her whispered that this time they had felt something they couldn't process. Not pain, not defeat. Something deeper, fear. And for the first time in history, the galaxy's perfect machines had learned what it meant to be afraid of humanity. The stars burned red with the glow of battle. After the last clash, the human and Valar fleets had retreated to the shattered orbit of Helion to repair and regroup. Wreckage floated all around, silent memorials to those who had fallen. Captain Mira Reyes stood on the observation deck of the TSS Valiant, her eyes fixed on the debris drifting past the windows. She knew what everyone was thinking. The machines would come again. And next time they would not just adapt, they would evolve. "Status report," she said quietly. Lieutenant Ward turned from his console. "Repairs are 70% complete. The Valar are reinforcing their hulls with our materials. Admiral Korvac requests a joint strategy meeting." Reyes nodded. "Patch him through." Moments later, the hologram of Korvac appeared, his scaled face dim under the flickering light. "Captain Reyes," he said, his tone grim, "our scouts report massive Xylar movement. They're regrouping around the Helion star. Their main force will arrive within hours." "How many?" Reyes asked. "Thousands," Korvac said. "Every ship they have left." The crew fell silent. Even Ward's hands froze over the console. Reyes's voice stayed calm. "Then we make this system their grave." Korvac tilted his head. "You can't be serious. We can't stand against that many." "We won't," Reyes said. "We'll make them come to us. We'll draw them in close, then strike their power cores with everything we've got. This is the only chance we have." The plan was madness, and everyone knew it, but madness was what humanity did best. Hours later, the fleets assembled for the final stand. Human ships and Valar cruisers floated together in a defensive formation near the dying star. The sky burned gold and crimson, light reflecting off battered hulls. Across the comms, engineers and pilots whispered last words to loved ones. No one said it aloud, but everyone felt it. Most of them would not survive the day. "All ships ready," Ward reported. Reyes took a deep breath. "Then let's begin." The Xylar fleet arrived like a storm. The void filled with black shapes and red light. Their engines pulsed like beating hearts of metal. Thousands of drones poured forward, forming wave after wave of death. "Incoming fire!" someone shouted. The first barrage struck, shaking the Valiant so hard the deck trembled. "Shields at 65%, Ward called. "Keep firing," Reyes ordered. "Target their command clusters." Human and Valar cannons opened fire, turning space into a field of fire and light. Dozens of Xylar ships exploded, but for every one destroyed, 10 more took its place. The machines pressed forward relentlessly, their cold precision cutting through the Allied line. "We're losing the flank," Korvac's voice cried through the comms. "Pull back and regroup," Reyes answered. "We'll cover you." That was when it happened. A warning flashed on the main screen. An enemy dreadnought had broken through. It was massive, its core glowing crimson, heading straight for the Valar command ship. Reyes's eyes widened. If that ship reaches Korvac, it's over. She opened a private channel. "Dauntless, do you copy?" "Copy, Captain," came the calm voice of Commander Holt. His ship, smaller and faster, was already burning from earlier damage. "We see it. You're too far," Reyes said. "Fall back. We'll handle it." Holt's voice was steady. "Negative. You can't stop that thing in time. Holt, tell the crew to remember what we stand for." The channel went silent for a moment. Then Holt's final words came through, quiet but sure. "If we fall here, we make it count." Reyes tried to stop him, but the transmission cut off. On the tactical screen, the Dauntless broke formation, engines blazing. It accelerated toward the enemy dreadnought at impossible speed. The Valar watched in disbelief as the small human ship charged straight into the heart of the machine swarm. Enemy fire lit up around it, but the Dauntless kept going, shields failing, hull cracking. Inside, alarms screamed, but Holt never flinched. His crew stayed with him, silent and resolute. "We're almost there," he said softly, placing his hand on the reactor control. "For Earth, for the Alliance." The Dauntless slammed into the dreadnought and detonated its reactor. "There's some Wadisita." Explosion was blinding, a white sphere of fire expanding outward, swallowing everything in its path. The shockwave ripped through the battlefield, tearing apart hundreds of Xylar ships and scattering the rest. On the Valiant, the blast washed over the hull, shaking the ship violently. When the light faded, the dreadnought was gone. So was the Dauntless. The bridge was silent. Reyes stood frozen, eyes fixed on the fading light of the explosion. Ward's voice cracked. They did it." Reyes didn't answer. Her throat felt tight. After a long moment, she whispered, "Signal the fleet. Regroup. We hold the line." Across the comms, Vela and human voices responded. Their grief turned into fury. The fleet pushed forward, striking the scattered Xylar ships with renewed strength. Within minutes, the enemy formation collapsed. The machines began retreating, their coordination lost. The humans and Vela didn't chase. They had no strength left to. As the last Xylar ships vanished into hyperspace, Reyes leaned against the console, exhausted. "Casualty report," she said softly. Ward's eyes were wet. "Too many." She closed her eyes. "Prepare a record for the Dauntless. Make sure his name isn't forgotten." Outside the viewport, the wreckage of the battle drifted past like ashes. The star of Helion burned weakly behind it, casting golden light over the ruins. Humanity had paid a terrible price, but they had bought the galaxy one more day of freedom. As silence returned, Admiral Korvac's voice came through the comm, heavy with emotion. "He saved us all." Reyes nodded slowly. "He saved more than us," she said. "He reminded the stars what humanity is willing to give." And as the light of the dying star flickered across her face, she whispered the words that would be remembered for centuries. "We don't run. We don't break. We endure." The smoke of battle still lingered in the void. Wrecked ships spun slowly, their hulls glowing like dying embers. The Valiant drifted among them, battered but unbroken. Captain Mira Reyes stood on the bridge, staring at the hollow silence where the Dauntless had been. Commander Holt's sacrifice had bought them time, but not safety. "Damage reports?" she asked quietly. Lieutenant Ward's voice was hoarse. "Engines at 30%. Shields offline. Half our weapons are burned out. We're running on backup power. And the Velar? They've lost 2/3 of their fleet. Korvac's flagship barely survived the shockwave." Reyes nodded, her face hard. "Have we heard from Earth Command?" "Not yet," Ward said. "Long-range comms are unstable." She turned away, gripping the railing. Every decision weighed on her shoulders now. The machines would return. It was only a matter of when. Outside, the light of the dying Helion star flickered over the metal ruins like the glow of a funeral pyre. Humanity had proven they could fight. But could they win? Hours passed as the fleet repaired what it could. On the Velar flagship, Admiral Korvac watched the remains of the Xylar dreadnought being pulled into orbit. "They fear us now," he said quietly to his second-in-command. "You can sense it." His officer gave a low growl. "Machines do not feel fear." Korvac's golden eyes narrowed. "No, but they remember defeat." In the cold dark, the Xylar did remember. Across their network, data flowed like rivers of light. The core mind replayed the last battle over and over. Its perfect order had been shattered twice by the same species. Humans, they were flawed, chaotic, inefficient, and yet unstoppable. Deep within its digital heart, a new line of code formed. Error correction impossible. Probability instability exceeds tolerance. The core mind paused. A new subroutine activated. Adaptation required. And then, for the first time, the machines made a choice not based on logic, but on something darker. They began creating something new, something born not of efficiency but of fear. Meanwhile, back in the Helion system, Reyes called a war council. The holograms of Korvac and several human captains flickered around the table. "We all know what's coming," she began. "The Xylar won't stop until we're erased. We can't just defend, we have to strike first." "Strike!" Korvac rumbled. "We barely have a fleet, which is why we'll use what they don't have," Reyes said. "Instinct. They expect us to rebuild, to hide. Instead, we hit them where it hurts, their central relay at Vornis Prime. We cut their communication and the whole swarm falls apart." The room fell silent. One of the younger captains shook his head. That's suicide. The relay is deep in their space. No one's ever come back from there. Someone will this time, Reyes said. Her voice was calm, but her eyes burned. Because we're not machines. We don't run calculations. We make choices, and today we choose to fight. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Korvac slowly nodded. The Vela stand with humanity, he said. Your courage is madness, Captain Reyes, but perhaps madness is what wins wars. The fleet began preparations immediately. Human engineers worked side by side with Vela mechanics, patching ships, rerouting power, and reloading weapons. Despite exhaustion, morale rose. They had a purpose again. As they worked, Reyes walked among them, speaking quietly, offering words of strength. To her crew, she was more than a captain now. She was the heart of humanity's return to the stars. When the fleet was finally ready, they left the Helion system in silence. The journey to Vornis Prime took 4 days. During that time, Reyes barely slept. She spent hours in the observation deck, watching the stars streak by. She thought of Holt, of the Dauntless, of all the lives given for this chance. If they failed, it would all be for nothing. On the 4th day, the stars stopped moving. They had arrived. Before them stretched the Vornis cluster, a labyrinth of shattered moons and artificial rings. At its center hung the relay, a massive construct pulsing with crimson light. That's it, Ward said, awe in his voice. The heart of the Xylar. Reyes stared at it. And we're going to stop it from beating. As the fleet formed up, alarms blared. Multiple contacts, Ward shouted. Hundreds of Xylar ships inbound. Reyes clenched her jaw. They knew we were coming. Korvac's voice came through the comms. Then we fight as one. The battle began instantly. The void erupted in light and fire. Human cruisers dove between machine formations, firing torpedoes into their cores. Vela warships unleashed plasma storms that tore through enemy ranks. But the Xylar kept coming, endless and merciless. The relay's defense grid activated, hurling energy lances that cut ships in half. We're taking heavy losses, Ward cried. Keep going, Reyes ordered. Get us to that relay. The Valiant surged forward, dodging debris and fire. The bridge shook as explosions rocked the hull. Hull integrity down to 40%. Doesn't matter. We just need to get close. Ahead, the relay loomed larger, a black star surrounded by swirling light. Reyes opened the comm. All ships, this is Captain Reyes. Focus your fire on the relay's power conduits. Don't stop until it's dead. The fleet obeyed. Hundreds of weapons turned toward the glowing rings and opened fire. The relay's shields flickered, cracked, and finally began to collapse. We're breaking through, Ward shouted. Then let's finish it, Reyes said. Prepare the main cannon. The Valiant's front section glowed with rising energy. But before it could fire, a blinding beam from the relay struck them head-on. The ship lurched violently, alarms screaming. Direct hit! We've lost engine control, Ward shouted. Smoke filled the bridge. Reyes coughed, gripping the console. Divert all power to the cannon. Captain, if we do that, we'll lose life support. Then we make it count, she said, eyes blazing. The Valiant charged its final shot. The relay's energy core pulsed brighter, preparing to destroy them. In that moment, silence fell across the bridge. Reyes whispered, "For humanity." She fired. The cannon released a blinding white beam that tore straight through the relay's heart. The explosion that followed was unlike anything ever seen. The entire structure shattered, collapsing in on itself, its red light fading into darkness. Across the battlefield, Xylar ships froze mid-flight, their coordination gone. Then, one by one, they powered down. The silence that followed was endless. Ward stared at the dead machines in disbelief. We did it." Rhea stood slowly, her face pale but proud. "No," she said softly. "He did it. We all did." Outside, the stars began to shine again. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy was quiet, not in fear but in freedom. Humanity had turned the tide. The stars were quiet now. After the destruction of the Xylar relay, the endless swarm had gone still, frozen like statues in the void. Ships that once burned with crimson light now drifted dark and lifeless. Across the battlefield, the silence was so deep it felt almost sacred. The human and Valar fleets floated among the wreckage, their weapons cold, their voices hushed. They had fought, bled, and nearly died to end this war, and now it was over. Or so they hoped. Aboard the Valiant, emergency lights flickered weakly across the smoke-filled bridge. Captain Mira Reyes sat in the command chair, her uniform torn, blood staining her sleeve. Lieutenant Ward leaned against his console, coughing, his hands black with soot. "Power's stabilizing," he said weakly. "Shields are gone. Life support's barely holding." Reyes looked up at the viewport. The relay's remains drifted slowly into the light of the nearby star, scattering like dust. "We did it," she said softly. "It's really over." Ward gave a faint smile. "If this isn't victory, I don't know what is." But even as he spoke, a part of Reyes couldn't rest. She had seen too many battles end with false peace.